Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Ish. I am the Texas Workers' Compensation Association Program Manager for the National Federation of Independent Business. I would like to welcome you all to the 2020 NFIB Texas Mutual Learn at Lunch. NFIB and Texas Mutual have had a wonderful relationship for nearly 20 years. One of our major initiatives each year consists of teaming up every fall to do these Learn at Lunch meetings around the state. This year, due to safety concerns, we've decided to do this as a virtual event. We have a great recorded program for you today. First, we have legislative news that's important to you. Second, workers' compensation, fraud, and investigations. And third, how to create a safe workplace environment. At the end of the program, we will have a live question and answer session with our speakers. Be sure to post any questions that you have as we go along by clicking on the orange arrow at the top right of your screen. Click on the questions tab and type in the box. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first recorded speaker, Annie Spillman, the NFIB Texas State Director.
Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Annie Spillman, and I'm the State Director for NFIB in Texas. That's the National Federation of Independent Business. And thank you for attending today. Many of you are small business NFIB members or Texas Mutual policyholders. This is our Learn at Lunch series that we do every year, and we do it across the state, and we get to go visit with you personally. Unfortunately, this year we're going to be recording the event, but that's even better because you can come back to this at any time and use our valuable information that we're going to share with you today. NFIB is proud to partner with Texas Mutual on this Learn at Lunch series and throughout our legislative endeavors as well in order to help make Texas a great place to do business. So let's begin the program. So who is NFIB? NFIB is small business. We are the advocacy organization in Texas, and NFIB represents pretty much every economic sector in the state, from construction to retail to services industry, manufacturing. We've got about 20,000 members in Texas. And sort of what is small business? Well, the Small Business Administration defines that several ways. It can define it as an employer that has 100 and fewer employees, or that an employer who might gross less than 5 million. It's defined many different ways, but for us, small business is those independently owned and operated businesses in Texas and around the country. Nationally, NFIB has about 300,000 small business owners, and we're proud to be the one and only advocacy organization for small business, specifically small business. And as an organization, we're a member-driven, run, grassroots organization. So we ballot our members, we ballot you, and we ask the members, what are the most important things to you? What are your biggest problems and priorities? And so we've got a research foundation that will survey our members on their biggest problems and priorities. And as well, before we come up with our legislative agenda, we ballot our small business members out there, and that's really what determines what we'll be working on at the Capitol. And you know, that's another explanation of NFIB. We run our advocacy program in each state in the country. And as a matter of fact, we have an office here in Austin, right by the Capitol. And so we go over there and we just make sure that regulators don't try to regulate you out of business or, you know, try to interfere with that employer-employee relationship. So when we poll our small business owners on their biggest problems and priorities, every single year, the cost of health insurance is number one. That's even above taxes and regulation. But as we've seen in Texas, property taxes have increased to the point where it's taxing people out of their homes and out of their businesses. So that's one of our biggest, you know, advocacy goals, is to get some tax relief at the Capitol, whether it be franchise tax or property tax. But the business personal property tax is one of the worst in the country. And although Texas is a business-friendly state, we really need to reform our business personal property tax model, which includes that inventory tax, which is really, really heavy on business owners. So, you know, taxes in Texas, we say to legislators that it's just another hidden regulation. And so, you know, the more you regulate or tax a business, the less time they have to focus on their employees and on their customers. And it takes away resources that you can use to pay into wages, benefits, hiring more folks, investing back into your business, expanding, buying equipment, things like that. So those are things that we do advocate for at the state and federal level. And then you'll see tax complexity is always very important. On there, number 3, locating qualified workers. Workforce skills training is one of the very most important things that we do as far as legislation is concerned. So we developed legislation several years back that would really encourage workforce skills training in schools, where that went away several years ago and really just focused on getting these students into a college, which is great, but now we need the folks to go into this workforce skills training and start graduating these students out into the workforce, and taking the stigma away from working with machinery or with your hands means you're a failure. By no means. I mean, we've got business owners that have great jobs out there for these folks right out of high school, and they could start making $80,000 a year. So moving on, not to insult your intelligence, but I always like to give people a little politics 101 lesson. I'm sure it's been a long time since we've all taken a political science class, and unless you were like me and a political science nerd, then you're not going to really remember the makeup of the Texas legislature. So just quickly, I want to remind you that the Texas legislature is not full-time. So it's not like DC. They're not full-time politicians. It's a citizen legislature, meaning that these people have jobs. They have jobs just like us. Many of them are small business owners. As a matter of fact, we're starting to see more people that are small business owners that are frustrated with the government trying to tell them that they know more about running their business than they do. We've seen them start running for office and winning, and that's good, because now we've got people in the Texas legislature that understand a day in the life, the small business owner and their employees, who are essentially their family to a small business owner. But in Texas, we only meet every other year, and it's every odd number year. So we've got a legislative session coming up in January 2021. And a little factoid is that legislative session starts the second Tuesday in January in every odd number year. So these legislators always kind of joke that they really, it's sort of a community service. These folks only make about $600 a month, and that's folks even coming in from El Paso or Amarillo, and it barely even pays for their travel. So they really are doing a service. But one of the things that people think kind of lobbyist is a dirty word. It's not. So lobbyists are advocates, and that's what we are. The small business owner does not have time to go drive up to the Capitol or to go and try to track every piece of legislation that would essentially legislate them out of business. So that's what we're here for. And so these politicians, these legislators, many times they file legislation with good intent. They don't know, though, that legislation could have immense consequences on you and your employees. And so that's what we're here for. We're here to teach them because, again, these people, many of them don't know, the manufacturing world or the retail world or any of that. And so that's when we give them that background. But then you'll see there how a bill becomes a law or doesn't. The good thing about politics in Texas and the Texas legislature is that it is a very diplomatic process. So, it's a long process. The bill has to be filed, it gets referred to a committee, it has to then be heard in committee, where many of us go and testify for or against the bill. And anybody, as you should know, can go up to the Capitol and you can testify for or against a bill. You can do that as a citizen of Texas. Anybody can do that. And so it has to go through the process on one side, and then it has to go through the whole process on the other. And so we have a lot of room to work with when it comes to making sure these people make the right decisions. So when they don't, we say, we tried to tell you. And then just another little quick tidbit is that the legislature is very short in Texas. So not only is it every other year, but it's for 140 days. And it's a lot of late nights, I'll tell you that. And so when we went into last legislative session, which was 2019, so 2 years ago, we had identified top 5 legislative priorities for small business owners. And again, that wasn't just me, the lobbyist, coming up with our legislative agenda. we surveyed every single one of our 20,000 members in Texas, and the small business members identified these top 5 legislative priorities. That being, and each of them really opened the door for a lot of other type issues that we work on, but property tax and franchise tax relief and reform. We really hadn't seen before last session any real tax relief since 2015. So that was 4 years prior to this last session. But this last session, there was a big piece of legislation passed, really more in the way of tax reform to the property tax system. It opened up more transparency to you, the business owner, the homeowner. It did cap what cities could increase the tax rate on. So before, cities could tax you 8.5% more than they did the previous year. And oftentimes we saw cities doing it 40% more. I mean, it was just out of control. But it put a cap on what cities can increase your taxes on. Unfortunately, we're still hearing from a lot of small business owners that their taxes have increased 40, 50, 60% above what they were the previous year. So it's going to take a couple of years to really see that relief. But it also put the power to the voters. So if the city just arbitrarily increased the taxes above that cap rate at 3%, it would trigger an automatic election, and voters could approve or disapprove that tax rate hike. We really haven't seen that put in play yet, and you know, obviously COVID has been a big interruption as far as the way, you know, the tax process works, and so they're paying less attention to some of the things that the cities may be doing against state law and paying more attention to COVID and what we're dealing with in 2020. You'll see reeling in regulatory overreach. We unfortunately have a lot of cities that have taken upon themselves to start regulating private employment practices. So whereas before, anything that created a new labor standard or regulated a private employer in the way that a private employer hires or schedules, or the benefits that they offer, or the wages that they pay, that's usually been addressed on the state level or the federal level, because that is a major change. And it affects the way you operate your business, and it affects the way you work with your employees. Well, we've seen in the last several years, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas, all three pass local ordinances. This is coming from the city level, local ordinances that would tell any business owner operating in that city that they had to provide paid sick leave, and it had certain standards. And although most small business owners offer some sort of paid time off, this would be a mandate, a government mandate coming down from the city. And if an employer were even, you know, accused of violating this paid sick leave local mandate, the city would have subpoena power over their records and subpoena power over their employees' records. It was really pushed by these national, labor unions coming in, and they knew they couldn't get it done on the state level, so they started pushing these mandates on the local level. And again, it's not about being against paid sick leave, because everybody can agree that paid sick leave is a wonderful benefit. But when you take the operations of a benefits program away from the employer in the way they run their business and the way they run, you know, their HR, and you put it in the hands of the city, who can barely even administer, and take care of the potholes in the road, it creates a major problem, and it just opens the door. It literally opens the door for these cities just piece by piece taking away these businesses from the business owners, and again, trying to proclaim that they know how to operate their business, or they know how to take care of their employees better than the employer does. So NFIB and several other groups sued the city of Austin because it was unconstitutional, part of this ordinance, and we did win. It went all the way up to the state Supreme Court. And so we struck down those ordinances in Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. But one thing that we worked on last session was trying to put in law, so codify, that we would preempt cities from trying to regulate private employment practices, essentially keeping them in their lane and sticking with their jurisdiction, and that anything dealing with employment law needed to be dealt with on the state level and the federal level. That's something we're still working on. It did not pass last session, but we're going to be working on it this legislative session in 2021. And then you'll see in there health insurance mandates, burdensome costs. So last session, about 40 health insurance mandates were filed, 40 bills were filed that would create health insurance mandates. Each of those mandates, for instance, like an insurance policy must cover cochlear implants. So those are, for essentially hearing aids. Any sort of thing that's added to a policy obviously adds to cost. And we've already said that you saw previously in our Texas Top 10 that cost of health insurance is one of the #1 biggest issues for a small business owner, because you're trying to provide insurance for your employees, but it's just grossly overpriced and almost impossible to do. So those were some of our priorities last session, and I will tell you, it's just a quick bar chart, that we had a very successful session last session. So luckily, in 2019, there were over 7,000 bills filed. Luckily, only 16% of those passed. And I say luckily because we don't need more and more and more legislation passed every single session. That's just more regulation. It's more red tape. It's more stuff to keep up with. It's more cost. It's usually more taxes. And we obviously do not need that. So NFIB in 2019, we testified on 116 bills. We actually tracked 1,300 bills. So those are pieces of legislation that would have some sort of impact on small business, whether it be good or bad, mostly bad. And I'm proud to say that every single bill, besides one, every single bill that NFIB opposed last session died. It did not make the governor's desk, and it did not see the light of day. The only bill that we opposed that passed was a health insurance mandate, but it was having to do with treatment after, some cancer treatments. And we thought, that's one health insurance mandate that it's going to be hard to pass. It's obviously helpful, and if anything, we let one mandate go through. And I think the cost to each policy in Texas was about, 16 cents more. So that was one that we did let go through because obviously we did feel that it was a mandate that was needed at the time. And so again, just to follow up with the 2019 successes, you'll see here those health insurance mandates, 23 were filed, 2 passed. And I'm sorry, the 2 that passed were both having to do with the same thing, so that's why I call it one. But unlawful employment practices. So you'll see that term, unlawful employment practices. Legislators are very intelligent, and the people that are giving them these pieces of legislation to pass are very intelligent and strategic. And so there's this thing in the labor code where they'll write a sentence and they'll say, essentially, if an employer does this, it creates an unlawful employment practice. Well, an unlawful employment practice is essentially going to find an employer in court, paying heavy fines, or shut down. And so there were 27 bills that would have created 27 new unlawful employment practices in the code, in law. And it's just 27 more ways to sue an employer and put you out of business. Minimum wage increases. So in Texas, we follow the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 per hour. There were bills that 40 bills filed that would have increased the minimum wage in Texas. And while it's a discussion that needs to be had, some of these were just arbitrary. It's just like, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Well, for a small business owner, just because the government mandates something doesn't mean they can afford it. So it's sort of economics 101. If they can't afford to increase minimum wage or provide a mandated benefit or whatever the case may be, then, unfortunately, they're going to have to make business decisions in order to keep their doors open. They might have to eliminate positions. They might have to cut back hours. They might not have to decide that they're not going to hire any more people. So it really drives a wedge in between the employer and their employee, and it ultimately hurts the economy because it really puts a pin in any sort of hiring or expanding. And then workforce and education, we were really happy that 17 bills passed that would really expand upon that workforce skills training in schools. And we also were really proud to support legislation that would create more access to broadband, to internet services in our rural communities in Texas. That's helpful for so many reasons. Obviously, it's helpful to small business owners who are out in these rural areas. They can, really start to utilize this broadband access. People can maybe even start opening businesses in these rural areas where they couldn't before. And then obviously right now and before with COVID, when people are having to do homeschooling, now these students out there, whereas they may not even had access to internet, because you hear on the news the initial problem is, well, they can't afford a laptop. Well, first things first, they need to have internet. So last session and that was in 2019, supported legislation that did provide that internet access out to those rural areas, and we're going to expand upon that this session in 2021. So you'll see here in this slide, originally when we sort of started talking about the interim, obviously the interim is the time in between these two legislative sessions. So 2020 is that interim year where we don't have a session, but we're still looking at issues ahead. And so initially you'll see big issues ahead. We were going to be talking property taxes again, property tax relief and reform, reeling in that regulatory overreach. We're always making sure that these legislators don't overregulate. And then working still on some more workforce development. Well, guess what? That's a little bit on hold right now, because now we're going into legislative session talking about economic recovery, period. I mean, before we even work on these other issues that are always issues for small business owners, we need to stop the bleeding right now, and we need to get these business owners back up and operating and hiring more folks, getting people back to work, and starting to get some revenue in so that they can continue to operate their business. So that's first things first. And so going in to 2021, we, NFIB, and several other business organizations and industry groups in the state are going to be working hand in hand to help pass a full Economic Protection and Recovery Act. And it's going to include a lot of components, and we'll get to that in just one second. But know that going into 2021, and right now we're October 2020, that plans ahead will include tax relief and regulatory relief, but we're going to package it as this economic recovery, because that's number one. And we're going to put anything and everything in there that's going to, again, stop the bleeding for these small businesses, get them back on their feet, get them operating again, getting some money in the door so that they can, hire people back, and so that they can hopefully increase their wages or provide benefits. And so, that's definitely one of the issues going into 2021 that we're going to be working on. It's obviously a big issue. Economic recovery should be the priority of every legislator in the state and Governor Abbott. So the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the EIDL loans through Congress. NFIB has been working nationally with Congress over the last 7 months. So that's, March to October 2020, on funding and some relief for small businesses, particularly. Working with Congress right now, it's October, and before Congress goes on recess, and before the election, and they're not coming back, until the end of the year, we've asked Congress for more funding. So we've spoken with our members, and as of September 2020, our NFIB members, majority, almost 100%, said that they had received either a PPP loan or an EIDL loan through the SBA, and that 86% of our members said they've already spent that money. And we still don't know how long this is going to last, this pandemic, this COVID. We don't know how long it's going to last. And so they've already spent that money. So we're asking Congress a couple of things. Refund, put more money back into that pool, and let business owners who have already applied for and received a PPP loan, let them go back and apply for and receive another loan. And that it not be another debt, but that it becomes a grant, because the business owner is allowed to spend that on, payroll, some debt forgiveness, utilities, rents, mortgages, leases, things like that. And if it's spent correctly, right now, 60% needs to be spent on payroll, 40% sort of on the rest. and then they apply for that PPP forgiveness, that luckily it becomes a grant and not another debt on the small business owner. So what we've asked Congress in that regard is that if any business received a PPP at $150,000 or less, that it would just be automatically forgiven, right? So the small business owner doesn't have to go back and fill out mounds of paperwork on how that's been spent and fill out applications. You know, there again, we need to make sure the focus is on their business, keeping people employed, running their business, being safe and healthy. And so that's where we are right now with Congress in October of 2020, and Congress has yet to act on any further relief. But you'll see that tell Congress to act now. That's one of the things that NFIB does. We'll put out calls to action to our members where you literally click a button and it'll take you right to your congressman. And there's talking points in there for you to tell your congressman that you need relief and they need to keep and maintain small business as a priority in this country, because as we all know, small businesses are the backbone of this economy, and you know, as goes small business, so does the economy. Legislative priorities in Congress and here in Texas are going to be, again, financial assistance. And we know that small business owners are sort of the last people to ask for a quote handout, but this is the time to do it, because we know that when a small business owner asks for financial assistance, that's going to go directly back into the business, and it's going to go directly back into the hands of their employees, who can put food on their table, can spend money out into the economy, and it's just a cyclical process. So we know that it works. If you fund a small business, that's what gets our economy back on its feet. Liability protections, you know, we need to create strong liability protections that enable small businesses to reopen safely and smartly without the fear of devastating lawsuits. So essentially, unless a small business has been grossly negligent and, you know, maybe, you know, knows that they're exposing people to the, you know, COVID virus, then there needs to be some sort of immunity for a small business owner, so that, again, they're sitting ducks. You know, you get these big trial lawyers that come out and they know a small business owner doesn't have an in-house attorney or, you know, a CPA sitting right there next to them at their desk. So they often go after the small business owners with these lawsuits, and they scare them because the small business owner doesn't have time to away from, you know, their business or money to hire lawyers. And they, you know, they threaten these small businesses and then just hope for a settlement. And that's generally what happens. So we're asking for some liability protections on the congressional level, and then here in Texas. Tax relief, obviously, like we talked about right in the beginning, property taxes are out of control in Texas. And we're still, you know, although we don't have the income tax, business owners are paying franchise tax. And so small business owners, whether they even owe the tax or not, they still have to hire a CPA to tell them if they owe the tax. And then two, many of these small business owners are paying the franchise tax whether they net a profit or not. It's a tax on your gross receipts, and it's a terrible tax, and it's never done what it was set out to do, which was sort of offset property taxes. And as we know, that's not working. So, and then unemployment insurance reform, we're asking, you know, let's reimburse these employees who have lost their jobs at the wages that they currently have. But it's almost incentivize them not to go back to work by giving them, quote, these bonuses above and beyond what their wages were. And then also, you know, the employer takes the hit on that. It's employers paying into the unemployment insurance pool. And so when their employees collect that money or continue to collect it, it just raises the rates on these small businesses. And guess what? Then it prevents them from hiring or, again, paying higher wages or better benefits. And then regulatory relief, you'll see there in parentheses, ASSET. That's a coalition that NFIB spearheads with 19 other business and industry groups, and it's the Alliance for Securing and Strengthening the Economy in Texas. We are going into this legislative session just to circle back to what I mentioned earlier, and we're looking for not only economic protection, but recovery. And so we're going to have a huge legislative package that will include some of these components that you see here. It's going to include even things, workers' comp, which Texas Mutual is talking about today, and incentives that even promote economic growth. It's going to include some tourism components, just anything and everything that we know that business owners are going to need in order to get back on their feet, in order to get this Texas economy back on its feet. And we want Texas to lead the nation in doing that. And so NFIB, through our coalition asset and these other business and industry groups, are going to be the head of the movement of this economic recovery and therefore small business recovery. And then just sort of getting close to wrapping up here, yes, COVID is the #1 issue of 2020 going into 2021, but there's still other issues that we work on federally, and it's been ongoing issues, and then ongoing issues that happen here in Texas. Some of you may have heard of this Corporate Transparency Act. The Corporate Transparency Act sounds really great. They put a lot of really neat names on things to make people want to vote for them or to make it feasible when they go back to the district and they have to explain it to you. So, there's been issues with big, like these drug lords, creating shell small businesses and funneling money through these shell businesses that aren't real businesses, but they just create these shell businesses. So this Corporate Transparency Act would create a lot of paperwork for real small businesses and have them report to FinCEN, which is through the Treasury, and just it creates a lot of paperwork, and it's not going to do what it set out to do. It's going to hurt the small business owner. It's going to be more onerous on the small business owner, and it's not going to stop these people from creating shell businesses. They're not going to say, oh, I can't have a shell business now because now I have to file paperwork and send it in. I mean, it's not going to work the way they think it's going to work. So that's something that we're opposing. And then the small business deduction, years ago, NFIB, it was during the beginning of President Trump's administration, and his first term, we worked on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so it really created some major tax relief for pass-through businesses, essentially small businesses, and it created a small business deduction. So that was only temporary though. So there's legislation on the federal level to make that small business deduction permanent. And so that's something that's ongoing. So even though the talk of 2020 and 2021 is COVID and everything that surrounds that, there's still other issues that we're working on. And I also want to take this moment to remind everybody that NFIB has a legal center. And so a lot of times there's things that happen through the Department of Labor or the Department of Treasury or the EPA or other federal or state agencies that NFIB sues on because they're unconstitutional or they hurt the small business owner. And so oftentimes we sue these federal agencies or we sue these state agencies, and we do that through our legal center. We also have our research center, which I mentioned earlier, and we use our research center, and we have a chief economist. NFIB has a chief economist, and we use that to do very deep dives into small businesses. And we have a survey that we put out quarterly, and it's quoted in every single national news network, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, it's in Forbes magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and they use our research data that comes directly from you. So it's a great thing, and it really puts a face on small business, and it helps people out in the universe sort of understand what small businesses face and sort of the thin margins that you're operating on and the things that you really have to deal with. And you're kind of carrying the world on your shoulders because as we see small businesses unfortunately start to close through this pandemic, we've seen so many people let go, and we've seen astronomical numbers of unemployment. And it's really unfortunate because before COVID in Texas, we had the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had in history of Texas and the nation. And then it just sort of COVID hit, and now we're trying to come back from that. But we are 2020, it's an election year. We are very involved in the elections. We have our political action committees here in Texas, and we've got it nationally. And so we always ask legislators to be a #SmallBiz voter, and we ask you to be a small biz voter. So you can go onto our website at NFIB, and you can go to our little voter elections portal that you'll see on our homepage, and it will show you who we've endorsed on the national level and it'll show you who we've endorsed on the state level. And how do we choose those endorsements? Well, if they're a legislator, it's through their voting record. We go into session every single session and we tell them what the most important issues are to a small business owner. And then we show them, as legislation's filed, this is going to be a key vote. And if you vote with us, you'll get a good score. And when I say us, I mean small business. And when you vote against us on this, you're not going to have a good score. And so ultimately, we show their voting records at the end of session. We share that with you out there, and we share it with media. And if they have a low voting record, they're not going to be endorsed by us ever again, and we'll probably end up endorsing their opponent. But then if they're a candidate, we have them fill out a candidate questionnaire, and we ask them, questions relating to your biggest problems and priorities. And if they align with the small business community, then we give them our endorsement. So be sure you go there and check that out. We've got a lot of great resources there. And also keep in mind that it's good for us to have a lot of followers. We post a lot of good information there. We like to even share some small business NFIB highlights, and we like to sometimes highlight your business on our social media and share that around. And so that obviously helps get your business name out there. Use NFIB as a resource for any of this COVID stuff. We've had our legal team go through and really also to help with the breakdown of the PPP and the EIDL loans and just what you need to do to comply with that. And we have an entire resource page. We've had webinars on COVID and any questions that you have to ask relating to those loans and relating to Congress and the Treasury and some of the legislation that they're passing regarding that. So use that resource page there. And I'll just sort of wrap up with one of my most favorite quotes, because I think it really explains either on the state level or the federal level or both. So, these legislators often, they do have good intentions, but the fact is no one knows your business like you do. And what I always like to say is, it's a quote by President Dwight D. Eisenhower: "Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're thousands of miles from the cornfield." So, everyone thinks it must just be so glorious to own a small business and so easy. But that's why we're here, because we explain sort of what the daily plight is and why we need to keep small businesses and Main Street alive in America. Because if we don't, we're going to see, a lot more unemployment, and we're going to see a bigger dip in the economy than we're experiencing now. So first and foremost priority going into legislative session is just making sure that you stay strong and that you can hire people back. And if you ever have any questions, use us as a resource. We're right here in Austin, Texas, and you can come over to our office or call at that number that you see right there. And then make sure that you go to NFIB Texas, Google, because we have our own little Texas resources there as well. Thank you, everybody. That is the presentation for NFIB. And always consider us a resource for you and your employees. And we will see you hopefully in person when we come back and present this presentation next year. Please use NFIB as your resource. Thank you. Stay happy and healthy.
Wow, what a lot of great information that we got there. Don't forget, type any questions you have in the question box for Annie. Up at the top, should be the top right of your screen. There, if you can't see it, there is an orange arrow. If you click on that, it will open up that panel box, and there is a questions tab there. Next, we have Christina Williams, who is the Texas Mutual Senior Fraud Investigator.
Hi, my name's Christina, and I'm a claimant fraud investigator with Texas Mutual Insurance. I'm going to briefly talk to everybody about the different types of fraud that we see and how an investigation looks. So let's jump right in. So there are three types of outcomes for an investigation. You have non-fraud, abuse, and fraud. And non-fraud basically means that there was not enough evidence to have an outcome of fraud or abuse. Abuse and fraud are very similar, and sometimes the only difference can come down to proving intent on behalf of the claimant. Here's what the law says. If someone knowingly or intentionally lies or conceals facts in order to obtain benefits, they are committing fraud. So Texas Mutual has devised a plan to try to get ahead of that, and they've created a fraud notice. And the fraud notice is read to the claimant at the beginning of every claim. It's submitted on every check, a paper check that they get in the mail, and it's also on the original letter when they're notified they will start receiving benefits. The fraud notice says, if you return to work in any capacity, if you receive medical release, or if you're incarcerated for any given time, you must notify your carrier, otherwise you're in danger of committing fraud. All right, let's talk a little bit about the types of fraud that we deal with. Course and scope. Course and scope basically means that the injury happened while on the job. So if you're not in course and scope, it means that the injury happened elsewhere. So for example, you might have the weekend warrior that's fixing something around the house and hurts himself. You're moving over the weekend and you injure your back, or maybe you just went to the lake and injured your knee while you were water skiing with your family. Most people don't go to the doctors over the weekend to check out the injuries, but what happens is Monday morning they come in and then they're still hurting and they think, well, maybe why not let the policyholder handle it? These are also referred to as Monday morning injuries and cause for concern. So it's just something to be aware of, and maybe it didn't happen in the course and scope, and then this is something you want to talk to your carrier about. The second type of fraud that we deal with are staged accidents. This could be just a false reporting of an event that didn't happen, or maybe the claimant will go to great lengths to create a scene to make it look like they had an accident. Some red flags to these type of claimed injuries are that there are no witnesses, they happen outside of unusual timeframes or unusual duties. So for example, if you have someone that does transportation for your company and they hurt themselves falling off of a ladder while fixing a light bulb 2 hours before their shift starts, that might be cause for concern. This is one of the best videos that I've ever found. This is a great example of a stage accident. Inconsistent activities is when someone is participating in activities that are inconsistent with what the medical records show that they should be able to do or what the claimant claims they are able to do. Doctors give restrictions in order to encourage improvement and to allow the claimant to rest and recover to get back to work sooner. However, some claimants want to continue their normal activities and then stay off of work while they do this. This particular video, the claimant had a clavicle injury while swinging a sledgehammer. The claimant was off of work, but continued to go to the gym and do other activities that the policyholder saw on his Facebook page and asked us to look into it. And then we did surveillance, and this is what we found. Another type of fraud is feigning disability, and that just means faking disability or faking the symptoms that lead to that disability. This particular claimant had a right knee injury, and he was off of work for a very long time. The policyholder began to get suspicious about his activities, and we did surveillance, and this is what we found. As you can see, he is significantly impaired. He has crutches, he has a brace from ankle to hip. He takes a very long time to get across the street. His gait is incredibly impaired. And in this video, he is actually traveling to his doctor's visit. And in the second video, you can see we caught him out about 6 hours later. He no longer has his crutches. He doesn't have the full brace anymore, and his gait has significantly improved to a faster pace. And then about 30 minutes later, he meets up with his wife, and you can see in his hand, he's carrying his crutches and his brace. And he's walking on fairly uneven terrain because his wife here actually slips and almost falls. And then 3 days later, we find him out, no crutches, no brace, no attempt to slow his gait down for anybody else watching. We actually found him going to work at this point. The last type of fraud that we deal with is working while receiving. You may have, or you have a claimant that is legitimately injured, and then while they're off of work medically and receiving benefits, they decide to return to work. They can return to the same type of work, they can start doing new work, they can do side jobs like mowing lawns for money, babysitting grandchildren for money. It doesn't really matter what type of job they return to. If they're demonstrating an ability to earn work, this is where we run into fraud. And this is why they need to notify the adjuster. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what a fraud investigation looks like. When we receive investigations, each investigator does a thorough claim review, and this could be previous claims, this could be any of the adjuster notes, any concerns or complaints written in the file record, just so we can get an idea of what's been going on. And if there are previous claims, what was the pattern in those claims as well. Medical review is also completed because we need to know what the claimant is telling the doctor. How does it differ from what the claimant is telling the policyholder versus what the claimant is telling the adjuster? Plus, there are little nuggets that are involved in the medical records that give us a little insight to what a claimant is saying or doing. For example, if you have a claimant that is documented as having an impaired gait or walking very slowly into a room or having trouble sitting on an exam table, and then a staff member sees him go from the office building to his car after everything's over and his gait is completely normal, sometimes those little nuggets are in the medical records. Or sometimes the doctors will ask directly, have you returned to work in any way? And so those things are really important, and they give us an idea of where to start in an investigation. A background check gives us information on the actual claimant, especially if we can't find somebody. It gives us a great deal of information regarding past addresses, additional phone numbers. It pairs them up with relatives, and if we're having trouble finding them, then we can link them through different relatives. That also comes in handy on social media and friends that they may know. So background checks are really important. It also gives us an opportunity to see what kind of criminal activity they've done, to know, because we're also in the field and interacting with these people. Another tool that we use is social media. We like to refer to social media as self-surveillance, because people put a lot of information out there and they don't really protect that information. I suppose they don't feel like people are watching, but the investigators at Texas Mutual actually are, and we snag that information as soon as we see it. So it could be something as simple as, congratulate me, I started a new job today, or my girlfriend and I moved in together and we carried a couch up 3 flights of stairs. Things like that, again, give us a foundation of where to go in the investigation. And during all of that information, we may discover that someone is working, we have an employment lead, we follow any other path that we need to. And so that's one of the areas that we go with. Surveillance is a huge part of what we do. We do it often, and it yields good results on a lot of cases. It's very hard to dispute a recorded piece of evidence that shows what the claimant is actually capable, opposed to what he's saying. Or if we find him working, it also gives us another lead. And the last little bit that we do in investigations is interviews. And interviews we conduct them throughout the entire process. We'll start with policyholders, possibly call witnesses, call and talk to supervisors that might have concerns. And that's how we start with the initial concern and what's going on in the claim. And then we may end with calling the claimant to either confront them if we have the evidence that supports it, or maybe put them on notice because we're just a tiny bit below the evidence that we need to move forward on something. So a lot of information was just thrown at you, a lot of good videos you saw. So why should you care? Why should you care about what's going on with fraud and abuse? And the bottom line is that fraud affects everything, and it does affect your bottom line. Just to give you an idea, in 2019, Texas Mutual investigators uncovered just over $890,000 in fraud. That's money that was not intended to go out the door because of fraud. They also identified $5.5 million in future savings. Future savings refers to money that would have continued to pay over the life of the claim had our department not been involved and we stopped we stop the benefits from going out. And the icing on the cake is the recoveries. The recoveries in 2019 were $273,000, and that's money that goes directly back into the claim and to the bottom line of the policyholder. So what does this mean for y'all? What can you do to help? So the first thing is to keep in contact with your injured worker. This is twofold. One, it allows you to kind of check in and see what's going on. Are they returning your phone call? Are they only calling you back on the weekends or the evenings after you've left for the day? Do you hear construction noises? Are they telling you they can't drive and yet you hear them on the road? The flip side is, if nothing's going on, it allows you to check in and remind them they are a valuable part of your workforce and that you want them to return. And so keeping tabs on them allows them to feel valuable and for you to know what's going on. Offer light duty when available. The longer an employee is out of work, the harder it is for them to return to the workforce. So it's really important, if you're able to offer light duty and accommodate their restrictions, then you definitely want to do that. And then if you have any concerns, address that with your carrier. And above all, notify your carrier if your injured worker returns to work in any capacity. It's very important. It's not just if they go to work for somebody else. If they return to work for you, they're no longer entitled to those benefits, or at least the amount of benefits they receive. So it's very important to notify your carrier if your employee returns to work. And if you have any concerns that you may not want to actually go on record with, you want to remain anonymous, Texas Mutual has a Fraud Stopper hotline and an email that you can call, or you can send an email, and someone in our department will review it and look at it and create a referral and allow an investigator to look at it and see if it warrants an investigation. Okay, thank you, everyone. That's all I have for right now. I'm sorry that we didn't get to do this in person, but I really appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Wow, I always love all those videos that are on there. They're always so much fun to watch. Be sure and get those questions in. That way we can start answering them, start getting them prepped to who they need to go to. Our final speaker today is Stacy Rose, who is the Texas Mutual Safety Services Manager. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm so happy to be here this morning. Again, my name is Stacy Rose, and I'm a regional manager of safety services at Texas Mutual. And you know, I'm so used to doing this on the road in the fall and meeting with people face to face and getting to see expressions and eyes and all of that. But this is exciting that we have the technology that we're getting to do this virtually. What I want to talk about today for the next 20 minutes or so is the importance of safety to small businesses. And I'll just say safety is important to any business, but in particular, small business. So I'm going to go to the next screen and pull up the agenda for the next 20 minutes or so that I have you. So here's the agenda, and there's four main things that I want to cover with you today. And the first being the return on investment of safety, the ROI, and why it's so important for small businesses to invest in safety. Then I want to cover some workplace safety tips. You know, as safety consultants, when we're out visiting with our policyholders, there's some best practices that we're always consulting about and making sure that our customers are aware of and they have these in place. So I'm going to go over those, and then I'm going to move into our Texas Mutual safety resources that we have available to our policies at no charge. We've recently updated and refreshed our whole resource catalog, and so we have a neat little video that I'm going to play you when we get to that point. And then finally conclude with why join an NFIB safety group. So let's go ahead and get started with the return on investment of safety, the ROI of safety. This slide right here, I think, is a good pictorial representing of what every company's most valuable asset is. And when you think about it, what is that? It's your people. And with small businesses, it's critically important. Small businesses, you could be working with a small team of folks. It's like an extended family. Or maybe you're working with relatives, your brothers, your sisters, aunts, and uncles. So it's incredibly important to invest in safety so that you are protecting those that you work with every day. This is an example slide here. This is a table. I'm just going to get right into a scenario that I always walk through with folks because I think it really helps people understand the importance of safety and to realize the true cost that injuries can play to a company's bottom line. So in this example, I'm going to be a safety consultant, and I'm going out and I'm visiting with a business, and I'm meeting with their safety manager. And this business, they sell doors, and so they've got a warehouse operation. And one of the first things I'm doing with this safety manager is we're sitting down and we're looking at the year's losses. And so from this table, you can see that there's been some losses. You can see the number of claims, and then way up on the right-hand column, you can see total incurred. And in the lower right-hand column, you see a little over $1,600. So we're looking at 4 claims throughout the year at $1,600. So my conversation with the safety manager is, he thinks that, hey, we've done pretty good this year. Low number of claims and overall low number of dollars. And so with that, this is where I bring in the ROI of safety, because what he's seeing there is what we refer to as the direct costs of an injury. In the world of safety, we tend to use this iceberg analogy quite often because it fits it perfect. As an iceberg, you see the tip, but a whole lot more is going on underneath the surface. Well, that's the way it is with injuries as well. When we think of direct costs, those are typically when you have workers' compensation insurance, that's the medical cost associated with a claim, as well as indemnity or lost time wages, which happens if the injury is severe enough that the injured employee is away from work for a while. So in that previous table, when we saw $1,600, that is our direct costs. So on the surface, it doesn't seem too bad, but what is going on underneath? Well, they're hidden costs. They're indirect costs is the term that we use. And these are things that a lot of times people don't think about, but are really relevant, and they contribute to the total cost of an injury. So back to the company and the safety manager that I'm visiting with, we're actually talking about a forklift related incident that happened a year earlier. And we're just reviewing that. And what happened was this forklift was going through a warehouse at high speed, carrying some product, and ended up crashing into the racking system. And so he was hurt very badly. And so when that happened, you had a lot of other employees who witnessed what happened come over and render aid. So when you think about that, everyone else that is coming over to help out, you've got a lot of lost productivity going on. Well, this impacts the total cost of the claim. Think about whoever has to complete an accident report. It could be a safety manager, it could be somebody from HR, but somebody's going to have to complete that accident report or an incident investigation. And this takes time. It takes interviews with people that may have seen what happened. And again, when you're interviewing people, those people are not doing their regular job. So you've got lost productivity and the cost associated with filing or completing that accident report. If the injury was bad enough and the injured worker is away from work, you may have to pay your employees overtime. So those wages are associated with the total cost of the claim. Hiring and training, you may be put in a position where you have to maybe hire new employees or temporary employees and train those people up. Wages and time go to the total cost of the claim there. What else? Property damage, right? So you have this forklift driver who has got product on the forks crash into a racking system. So there was damage to the forks on the forklift. There's damage to the product that he was carrying. There's damage to the racking system and damage to the goods that were on the racking system. It's like a domino effect. So you can't forget about property damage or damage to goods when there's an accident. And again, this goes to the total cost of an injury. Morale's a big thing. Think about your business, or think about maybe it's a business that you've worked for before where people are getting hurt on the job a lot. That has a tremendous impact on morale. And when morale is low or when it's been impacted like that, typically productivity is lower, you have increased absenteeism. So again, affecting the total cost of the claim here. And then again, if it's serious enough, you may be visited by OSHA and be subject to audits and potential fines. So there's one thing I want to mention before moving on. This is a neat tool that oftentimes we talk to our customers about, and if we help them prepare for a safety training meeting, we'll show. And this is the OSHA Safety Pays calculator. And you can Google this, and it will pull right up or take you to the OSHA website. But what it does is it provides an estimated cost, or what you do is actually you can input the direct costs of your claims into a calculator, and depending on your company's profit margin, you can estimate the total sales it's going to take to make up for those injuries. So bringing us back to the example that we're using here today, what we thought, again, were relatively low costs overall, our direct costs, a little over $1,600. But what were our indirect costs? Here in this example, it's a little over $7,300. And when you go to the OSHA website, you read about the ratio of direct costs to indirect costs. Typically, what's used is for every dollar of direct costs, you've got anywhere from $3 to $5 of indirect costs. So in our example here, we used 4.5, which brings us to a little over $7,300. So from the OSHA Pays Safety Calculator, you can estimate how many more sales am I going to need to cover the direct cost, or the indirect cost, or the sum of the two. And in this example, we're just using how much in additional sales do I need to cover for the indirect cost if I have a 5% profit margin. And so you can see, dividing the 7371 by 0.05, that's $147,000. That is a lot of additional sales that it takes to make up for what we initially thought was some low number of claims and low severity. So what's the takeaway message here? The return of the ROI of safety. First and foremost, it's having safe, uninjured employees. There's a whole list of the benefits here, but I'm going to just cover a few. Of course, when you have employees that aren't getting hurt, they're going to be at work. They're going to be more productive. You're going to have reduced absenteeism. You're going to have increased morale. And this last bullet point here is decreased workers' compensation costs. And this is a big one because, of course, we know losses impact your experience modifier and ultimately your premiums. So let's transition into tips for a safer workplace. So I mentioned, as safety consultants at Texas Mutual, we're out visiting with our customers every day, talking to them about best practices when it comes to creating a safety culture, creating safety programs, work practices, etc. So one of the first things we talk to people about is that it starts by the people who you hire. So you want to be sure that you have established hiring procedures, and you want to be sure you review those from time to time. You need to establish a training schedule for those new hires. When we look at injury data and to see the rates at which people get hurt, new employees, especially when the first year, and especially even more so within the first 90 days, get hurt on the job, much more so than more tenured folks. So it's very important to create new employee orientation that includes safety training. Review or create a written safety plan. We get this question often: if I'm a small business, do I really need to have things in writing? And the answer to that is yes. It's best practice to have things in writing. It doesn't have to be something as complex, of course, as a larger business would have, a more complex business with more hazards, but having something in writing keeps consistency from employee when it comes to onboarding and recurring training. Regularly inspect your workplace for hazards. Whether you're in an office setting or whether you've got a shop or a warehouse, or maybe it's construction, you're out at a job site, you need to have some sort of formalized inspection process where you get out periodically looking for workplace hazards, and you've got some sort of method in place to correct those hazards. You want to investigate accidents. So when an injury occurs, you want to figure out, and it's not for fault finding, because a lot of times people think this is what it is, but rather you approach it with trying to figure out what went right and what didn't go right. And the whole purpose is so that we can figure out what are the contributing factors, root causes, so that we can help prevent or at least mitigate the chances of this type of injury happening again. Launching a substance abuse program at Texas Mutual, we support this fully. And again, this starts with hiring, doing a pre-employment substance abuse testing, having a full comprehensive program and applying it fairly is key. Other elements of a substance abuse program after you hire somebody could be, for cause, or it could be random, and then post-injury testing. So COVID-19, of course, I did want to talk about this briefly, since this is, of course, the climate that we're living in today. We get lots of questions about this. I think all the bullet points that you're looking at on this slide, all the policies regarding safe work practices, I think a lot of us are familiar with now. Social distancing, PPE, doing temperature checks, increasing your sanitation practices, disinfecting common and high traffic areas, and then reevaluating business travel. At Texas Mutual, when we get these questions, things are changing so rapidly. We are by no means the expert. And so we are constantly following organizations such as the CDC and OSHA, Texas Department of Insurance, TDI, World Health Organization, the WHO, as to their guidance. And I suggest that you do the same as well. This slide right here, I wanted to incorporate some of the resources that we tried to put together for our customers. Last month, we held an online safety summit where we had some panelists talk about some of the best practices that they are doing in terms of COVID-19 safety. And here we've recorded that summit. And so you can take a picture of this screen. We've got the website there that you can see. We've also put together some webinars. COVID-19 series is what we refer to them as. So the first one that we did was just an effects on the workplace. And then we've had some specific presentations covering certain industries such as construction, manufacturing, and retail. Very appropriate, fits right in with the NFIB safety groups. Again, all of those were recorded. They're available to the public on our website, so you would just follow the web address there to get those. And then safety resources in our catalog. We've got a COVID-19 prevention program. It's a Word document. You can download that, edit it, and tailor it to your business needs. There was an interesting PowerPoint presentation that we have called it's Returning to Work Post-COVID-19. And then there's some specific action plans too that are industry specific that are pretty neat. They're short, but related or relative to construction, retail, and manufacturing. And then finally, we're keeping an FAQ page on our website, and the link is right there, but all the questions, the most common questions that come in, we're keeping a page dedicated to that. Some of those questions are safety related, but of course you've got some that are audit related, and then you've got a lot that are, of course, claims related. So speaking of Texas Mutual safety resources, we revamped our safety resource catalog about a month ago. And so we put together a little video that I want to show you. It's about 2.5 minutes, but it's really good here. So let me press play.
Navigating the Safety Resources Catalog from Texas Mutual is a snap. As a policyholder, you have exclusive access to an expanded collection of safety resources to help protect your employees and your business. To get started, log in to texasmutual.com. Then choose Safety and go to the Safety and Employer Resources catalog. Next, you'll see the catalog homepage. You have all the latest safety catalog updates in the featured communications section. Our team curates the most relevant materials to keep your business safe and up to date as our world changes. The homepage is your starting place to find any resource. Let's say you're updating your workplace safety program on slips, trips, and falls and need to find relevant materials. You can just type a keyword in the bar at the top of your screen to search, and you'll see a list of all related results. You can filter your search with the side navigation bar in a number of ways. Let's refine by industry to look for construction resources. We also are looking for a PowerPoint presentation for our safety program, so we can refine by type or format as well. Now that we've found what we're looking for, click View to open the resource. If the document is available in multiple languages, you'll be able to select the language you need here. You can also find resources available in Spanish by checking the option under Type or Format. Once selected, your content will download automatically. Quick tip: the navigation bar at the top of the screen is a great place to start when looking for new content. You can easily find all types of resources for your next safety meeting, industry basics, and newsletters to share with your employees. You can also find regulatory and compliance materials, as well as basic workers' compensation information. Another great way to find content when you aren't sure what you need is the Browse All Content feature. From the catalog homepage, you can click Browse All Content and refine your search using the side navigation bar to find a resource that works for you. There are thousands of resources available, so don't wait on enhancing your safety program. Get started using Texas Mutual's Safety Resource Catalog today. Contact our safety services experts with any questions. Our team is standing by to help.
Excellent video there that our marketing team put together. In addition to our safety resources, I have to plug a awesome team that we have at Texas Mutual. They're called the Safety Services Support Center, and this team we created about 5 years ago, and they are located at our corporate office. It's a small little call center that we have dedicated to answering questions about safety. You can reach them if you've got a question by calling a phone number that's dedicated to this team. It's 844-WORK-SAFE, so that's pretty easy to remember, 844-WORK-SAFE, or you can email them at safety@texasmutual.com. So it's these guys that will help answer questions related to safety. If you're searching for a particular safety resource that you need for a safety training meeting, that's what they're there for, to help you. In addition to that, they will help you set up a username and password, help you navigate our website. They conduct virtual safety surveys, and then in addition to that, they're the guys that help create some of our technical resources, such as our toolbox talks and our webinars. Another great tool that we implemented about 3 years ago in 2017 was a learning management system, or e-learning system, and this gives you, the employer, the ability to assign training, online safety training, to your employees. You're able to track that training. These training modules have quizzes at the end so that you can see whether or not your employees are learning what they need to be learning. Currently, we have over 400 courses in our e-learning system, with many of those available in Spanish. We have outreach events that go on typically throughout the year. And I have to say, this year has looked quite different than in years past. Typically in the spring and in the fall, we're doing policyholder workshops, which you've got presentations from claims, fraud, and safety services. These are usually take place about half a day in varying cities. We also have safety summits, and we'll usually have about 4 of those throughout the year in different cities. And again, those are usually a half a day event where safety is front and center. This year, obviously, we're having to do those differently. We're having to do virtual events. So I just mentioned we had our summit about a month ago. We recorded that event, so I encourage you to go out there and watch that. And I know we're doing some claims seminars for our policyholders, with the next one being at the end of October. And then finally, safety and health courses. We at Texas Mutual have partnered with various colleges around the state. There's 11 colleges that we help provide grant money to help support their risk management and safety and health programs and courses. We've got Delmore College and Corpus Christi, and these are all over the state. So just to name a few, you've got Midland College, we've got El Paso Community College, College of the Mainland in Texas City, Kilgore College. So if you live in these areas, take advantage of this. This is super, because these courses are not only available to our policyholder, but to the open to the public, to the community. All right, lastly, I want to touch on NFIB and the safety groups that we have at Texas Mutual. And so there's 3 different ones. We have wholesale retail, construction, and manufacturing. And so what are the benefits as a policyholder to belonging to one of these safety groups? Well, one big one is that there's potential for workers' compensation premium discount. And then this one is a biggie. You have 2 potential Texas Mutual dividends. So as a policyholder, you've got your potentially your individual policyholder dividend, but if you're also part of a safety group, you've got the chance to get a safety group dividend. And here's just some stats that we've paid out since 1999, $3.1 billion in dividends. So this is a great benefit to being in a safety group. I encourage you to research this and check it out. You can visit the NFIB website to learn more about their resources and membership benefits. And this is at nfib.com. So in conclusion, just want to hit some high points that we've talked about today. And the first one, the ROI of safety, considering the true cost of injuries. Oftentimes, people are focused on just the direct costs, those medical benefits and indemnity payments, but just keep that iceberg analogy in mind. There's a lot more going on underneath the surface that adds to the cost of claims and can impact a business's bottom line. Best practice to implement and enforce a safety program. Create a positive safety culture. Make it just routine and a normal part of your day-to-day work. Take advantage of Texas Mutual free safety resources. Again, I love that word, free, because we have so many available resources available to our policyholders. And then this is a big one too, NFIB safety groups. If you're not in a group, please ask your agent about the eligibility to be in the group. Okay, and that concludes my presentation for today. I can't thank you guys enough for taking time and watching our first virtual Lunch and Learn. We appreciate your time, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you again to all of our speakers. We will now start the live portion of our presentation, and I will turn this over to John McCord, the NFIB Texas Legislative Director. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Debbie. And just as a reminder, while we get started with the Q&A portion here, if you do have questions for any of our presenters today, over in the little dashboard, there is a drop-down menu for questions. Feel free to go in there, type something for any of the presenters, and we will do our best to get through the questions. We do have several. Any that we do not get to today, we will make sure to respond to you offline. We will get them via either an email or a call back as quickly as we possibly can. For questions, let's go ahead and start with Christina. This first question comes from Andrew. It says, can you go into a little bit more detail about potential signs of fraud?
Sure. So a little bit was touched on in the actual presentation, but there's kind of 2 categories. One is at the time of the accident. So if you have those Monday morning injuries where there's no witnesses, unusual duties that they were performing, time frames, those are cause for concern. Any kind of delayed reporting, any kind of inconsistencies with what they're saying. We once had someone that ran into a forklift, the actual prongs on the left side, and then later we watched the surveillance of their break room and they had the ice on the right side. And so little things like that need to be brought up in a timely manner when everything is first happening. Now, once we get into actually paying the claim and doing things like that, if you have inconsistencies, maybe you're hearing rumors, maybe you're seeing what the claimant is doing versus what he's telling you he's capable of, anything like that, don't discount rumors whatsoever, because that's a great deal of where our referrals come from. And so it's really important that you kind of trust your gut and actually talk to the adjuster, talk to your carrier about it, call that fraud hotline, get that information out there. Another big one is if they're not communicating with you anymore, especially if they start communicating and then suddenly they drop off, that's a problem and we need to know about it.
Awesome, thanks. Next question is gonna go to Stacy. This one says, hi, I'm part of a small manufacturing company. I am the HR manager with responsibility of safety. Does Texas Mutual have sample safety programs to share or offer to their policyholders? I could use the help. Thank you. Stacy?
Yes, that's a great question. And we do have safety programs available to our policyholders. And so it's, for a small business, we see this all the time. You've got people wearing multiple hats. And so we've got safety programs, whether it's general or something specific like a machine guarding safety program. We have those in writing, and we have the templates already built for you so that you're not having to start from scratch and recreate the wheel. In the video that was showing regarding our new resource catalog, you can just simply type in the search box safety programs, or again up there at the top, there was a little tab called safety resources, and you can get to the templates that way. And there is a plethora to choose from.
Perfect. Thanks, Stacy. All right, Annie, we're going to go over to you next. As I'm sure you know, we are 3 weeks out from Election Day today, and I believe today is also the 3-month mark away from session. So we've gotten a couple questions today, and it's one that we get here in the office pretty frequently, is what is a legislative session going to look like in the age of COVID?
Thank you, John. Thank you for the question. Well, generally what session looks like for John and myself is usually we're going over to the Capitol, visiting with offices, letting them know what the biggest problems and priorities are for small businesses, attending hearings live there, and usually testifying. And having these one-on-one meetings are very important, and actually going and watching the votes on the House floor and the Senate. Right now, our Capitol is not open, which is very odd because usually it's open to the public 24 hours a day. We've heard several different rumblings. Understand that there's the Open Meetings Act, and then this is Texas, and you are part of the process. So they're not going to close that off to the public insofar as how you can communicate with your legislator. While we might not have in-person hearings, we've been told they're still going to allow folks to testify. So usually, in order to save time, you can offer that testimony through John and myself. And generally, NFIB is invited to literally have a seat at the table. What that might look like is more of a virtual seat at the table, but we can relay your message through that testimony there. And we are hearing they might limit how many people can come in and out of the Capitol. However, there's still going to be virtual visits, and then we're hearing that legislators might be coming outside of the Capitol to visit with some folks in sort of satellite office situations. But you can still go on to the Texas Legislature online and watch any of those activities online, and we encourage that.
Awesome. Annie, we're going to stay with you for one more really quick. This is more on the federal legislation that is or is not making its way through Congress right now. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the White House and Speaker Pelosi kind of negotiate back and forth on an extension of PPP funds, along with some other relief projects that would be included in that bill. Over the weekend, you saw some news reports where Senate Republicans were fairly upset with the White House because the price tag of any relief bill that they're negotiating with the House is getting too expensive for the Senate's taste. And then just this morning, you saw the Senate come out and say that they were going to pass just an extension of PPP funds and nothing else before Election Day. What are the NFIB guys in DC hearing as far as what's actually going to come out of Congress, if anything?
Right. Well, there was a whole HEROES Act, which would have included a lot of elements that would help small businesses get back on their feet, and some more stimulus just for sort of the regular person that doesn't own a business. To be honest, our folks have been in discussions, and they're being realistic right now. I mean, if anything, we had hoped that a skinny package would come out before they go into lame duck session and don't come back until after election. But because they cannot come up with these negotiations and really come to the table and agree, we're not really hopeful that much is going to happen. And really, at this point, we have asked our small business members and through our lobby team, asked Congress to just act now. And if we can only get one or two things, it be that they let business owners come back, that they put more money into the PPP, and that they let business owners apply again, and that if they have a loan at 150 or less, 150,000 or less, that's going to be automatically forgiven. You know, honestly, right now that the clock is ticking, and unless they do anything, it's not looking like it's going to happen. But we're still pushing them, and if anything's going to happen, it might just be like John said, that one or two components of that, and then, you know, unfortunately, going to have to wait until they come back after the elections into the end of the year. And at this point, we've let Congress know that many of the businesses, without further relief or regulatory help, they won't be there at the end of the year for them to come and try to help at that point.
Sure. And I do want to mention that we promised to have y'all out of here by 1 o'clock. I am going to cut questions off, so we do hit that deadline. But I think we have time for a couple more. And then, like I said earlier, please feel free to enter any questions you may have in the chat box there or under the questions tab. If we don't get to it in the next 4 or 5 minutes here, I will make sure that the appropriate person does get your question and is able to respond here in the next couple days. Christina, let's come back to you really quick. There was a question. I loved your presentation and am fascinated by the investigation process. What does typical surveillance look like?
Okay, yeah, everybody loves the surveillance. I mean, I have to admit, as an investigator, I love surveillance too. So typical surveillance will start at say someone's house. If we don't know where someone lives, then we'll go to another area we know they're going to be at, like maybe a doctor's appointment. Those are good places to make contact with them, confirm IDs, things like that. What we don't do is violate the law. We don't do things we're not supposed to. We adhere to those kind of things, and that's a common misperception on when we can do surveillance. We cannot go into someone's house. We cannot send a drone into an air duct. I've been asked that question before, so keep in mind that we have to adhere by the law when we do these kind of things. But we do get lucky. We have a great set of PIs in addition to ourselves that do surveillance, and they've been vetted. They have 20+ years of experience. They go all over the state of Texas. Everybody does a really great job and for the same outcome. Yeah, I mean, we get all kinds of crazy things, but that's typically how they start, and then we just kind of follow them down the rabbit hole to see what's going on. And sometimes we find them at a job site. Sometimes we find them heading to basketball practice or different things like that creates the great videos that you saw in today's presentation.
Absolutely, and I think this was my 3rd year doing the Learn at Lunch series, and I will always love to see the new videos that y'all come up with.
I know, even I have, Christina, I have safety consultants that ask that same question, you know,
Yeah.
What's the surveillance like? And, you know, if they need somebody to hide in the bushes, you know, pick me, I'll do it,
Right.
you know?
Well, and it sounds really appealing until you're out there for about 3 hours and you're like, oh, this is,
Yeah.
So it is hard work. It is fun, but it is hard work.
Yeah, it always looks fun on TV till you have to do it, right?
Yes, exactly.
John, if you don't mind, I just wanted to remind the viewers that if you'll go on to the NFIB.com homepage, you'll see the elections page. And we do have, you know, early voting that starts today. And we've got our endorsed, you know, pro small business folks on there. I know I mentioned it. Please go on and check that out. And then again, you know, reach out to us for any questions or anything that you'd like for us to work on at the Capitol on behalf of you. We'll be sending out our ballots soon, and that's the way for you to also have a voice through our balloting process.
Absolutely. We have 90 seconds left, so Stacy, I'm gonna give you the last question here.
Okay.
I have a small construction business. Besides a general written safety plan, are there other programs that I need to help supplement what we have?
The short answer is yes. Most likely you do. There's certain safety programs that apply to almost every kind of business. Examples would be a hazard communication program and some sort of like emergency response or emergency action plan. For construction, it's important to have emergency response plan in place. If you're out at a job site and somebody gets injured, what do you do? And where's the closest health facility, hospital, et cetera? Depending on what kind of construction that you're in, if you're doing roofing work or working from heights, you might need a fall protection program or ladder safety program. If you're an electrical contractor, you might need electrical safety or something related to lockout, tagout. So to start with, it's the general safety program that applies kind of to everybody. And then of course, you're going to have, you know, offshoots and things that supplement that. But good question.
So thanks, Stacey. And we have officially hit the 1 o'clock hour. I want to thank everyone for joining our first ever virtual Learn at Lunch. Hopefully next year when we do the fall series that we will be back around the state with everyone again. But thank you for joining us. Here in the next day or two, you will receive a link for a recorded version of the Learn at Lunch. So have a great afternoon. And should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you see the social media links there on the screen. Please join us on social media as well. Thanks, everyone. You'll have a good afternoon.
Thank you.